Well, Andrew, what's your reaction to today's judgment by the High Court?
Well, Bernard, we're clearly disappointed by the decision that's been brought down. But what we're going to do now is consider our options. We've got a period of 20 days before we need to decide from a legal perspective whether we'll appeal it or not. And so we're just going to get the 179 pages that's been brought down, and we're going to go through it thoroughly. We're going to get some internal and external and new legal advice to determine what our options and next steps might be, and that will include whether we appeal it, but we think at this stage that we will appeal it.
Can you tell us what these structured finance transactions were all about?
So the transactions occurred about 10 years ago, and they occurred between 1999 and 2002, and at that point we ceased them. And basically they're a process of looking at structured finance transactions which will enable some legitimate tax deductions. What we did at the time was go through a very thorough, considered, extensive process. We got internal advice, we got external legal advice. We actually had similar transactions. We took to the IRD and we asked them for their view, and we got what's called a binding ruling. Not on the specific transactions here, but on very similar ones. So what we did at the time, 10 years ago, I think was go through a thorough, extensive process, and I think we acted absolutely in good faith, and we were prudent and thorough and professional. So clearly at the time, we thought we were going through a sound process and that we were making a sound decision and that we were operating within the appropriate legal and tax framework. So clearly that's now been disputed by the IRD, and we've disputed it, and we've gone through this process of the court hearing, which I think that's an important democratic and legal process. The finding has been heard at this point, and so we respect that process, and that there's a dispute both ways. And now we need to consider what we do. But in answer to your question, these occurred 10 years ago, and they were thoroughly and fully researched at the time, including discussing similar transactions with the IRD before we proceeded.
So the IRD have said that you were trying to avoid tax, were you?
No, not at all. We went through, as I said, a thorough process. We looked at the tax law. We looked at internal advice, external advice, and as I say, took similar transactions earlier to the IRD and said, what do you think? And they gave us that's called a binding ruling. So no, absolutely. We operated in good faith and absolutely believed at the time that we were operating within the correct commercial and tax framework at the time.
What does this mean for BNZ now in terms of what it makes in provisions and whether it changes the way it does business? For example, does it change its pricing or its competitive structure to cope with this potential $600 million plus payment?
Yeah. So we're going to now go through this 20-day quiet time of considering the 179 pages and what we do. If we need to make this payment, let's go forward and imagine that's going to be paid, then we stand able and willing to make that. So we have obviously had some time to consider what might happen in this case at this point, and this was one of the options or scenarios that we imagined could possibly happen. So we have been prepared for this, and we know that if we make it, we can make it out of this year's profitability of the bank. So the first point is, if it needs to be made after this process we go through, we will make it, and we can make it. That's point one. Point two is, it's a one-off payment outside, if you like, the normal operations of the bank, and we can make it out of this year's profit. Our ongoing operations are very sound and very strong. So our liquidity levels are high. We're holding over $5 billion of cash and liquid securities. Our capital is strong. We're holding well in excess of the Reserve Bank requirements. We've been lending. We've lent almost $2 billion to New Zealand businesses this year. So, and we're also launching new products and opening new stores and new buildings and things like that. So the bank, we've continued to run the bank and we'll continue to run it prudently and sensibly, and we are very strong and stable. I think the third point is that the market's very competitive in deposits, home loans, business loans, and we've got some strong banks and they're fighting for share, and they're wanting to win new customers and keep good customers. So look, I think competition is going to ensure that customers, whether they're retail or business or corporate, continue to get sharp deals either deposits or lending, and they continue to get good service levels.
If I was a customer of the bank, and people out who aren't customers, they would say, hey, I pay my taxes every year. Looking back on it, given that you've had to spend an awful lot of time on lawyers and late nights and all this drama, do you regret, or does the bank regret getting involved in these structured finance deals?
So we clearly have a different view to the IRD about the appropriateness of these transactions, and we're now going to go through this process to determine whether we should appeal, which we think we will. So it's clearly a difference of view. What we did, though, 10 years ago was go through a very thorough process. So this wasn't taken lightly, it wasn't rushed, it was very considered inside the bank. We got external advice, and we actually gone to the IRD with similar transactions. So we actually, at the time, have, I think, operated in good faith and believed that we were operating, we were doing something which was allowable, and that we were getting advice that was the case. Now, clearly, that's been disputed, and it's still in dispute. So, in answer to your question, I think we've undertaken in good faith 10 years ago a thorough process. We have a difference of view, obviously, with the IRD, and this is the process that's now playing out in New Zealand, which is appropriate, a democratic and sound legal structure of challenge to that. We certainly respect the process that's happened, you know, the ability for a court, a judge, to hear both sides, make a determination. Now we have to decide, do we challenge that or appeal that?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernard.